So the first session will be about the introduction to transformers. So we will talk about the timeline of attention, like how the attention comes into being, and where we are right now, and the future of the attentions, like how it's going to get involved. And last, we will talk about some applications, mainly the BERT model and the GPT model. And of course, these models will be further covered in the next meetup. And comparing what's the difference of this version versus the Stanford course recording is that the main difference is that I actually will include more introductory materials, because I feel that to fully understand that, there will be some prerequisites. So I will try my best to include that prerequisites in the introduction as well. Okay, so first is the timeline of the attention or the transformers. So before the transformers, there is this RNN or LSTM, right? So this is a recurrent neural network or the long-short term memory network. So this type of network is proposed to model the sequence. Right? When I say sequence, it can be, say, the language. So language is a sequence of words, or it can be the like a time series, right? A time series is a sequence, such as the stock market price is a sequence. So this type of models is proposed to specifically model a sequential data. And then later on, in 2014, a simple attention is the first time that it got proposed, mainly to solve the encoder-decoder problem, which I will also introduce later on. And then in 2017 is the beginning of transformers, mainly from the paper, Attention is All You Need. So basically in that paper, it throws away all the sequential models. So, so it throws away the recurrent neural network architecture. And then just based on attention, then you can model the sequence effectively from that. And then since that paper, there will be there was an explosion of transformers in NLP, right? So based on that transformer, the base transformer, it develops like many variants of the transformers. And also it explodes into many other fields, not just like in artificial intelligence applications, but also like this AlphaFold. I think everyone may have also heard about that, right? From the DeepMind, is using the transformer to solve the protein folding problem. And present, yeah, so there are many types of transformers, and we are getting more. And I think we are actually in future on this timeline, which is like recently the ChatGPT, right? So you see like how it's actually kind of may transform the way we seek information, right? So this is how kind of, yeah, it's a pretty exciting field. And it definitely, I think it affects like many industries across. So this is a basic timelines of that. And where we are right now, so we are actually right on the edge of realizing the transformer potential in different fields. For example, we use that to solve the long sequence problems, such as the protein folding or offline reinforcement learning. Right here is an example of, let me shrink it a little bit, on the protein folding problem. So the protein folding problem to me is basically from how to construct a 3D structure from a 1D sequence. So if you think that way, yeah, so it's basically like input is a 1D, it's a 1D amino acid sequence, right? So it's just a 1D sequence, and the output of the network is actually reconstructed 3D structures of the proteins. So here the chart shows like I think the blue is the one generated by the AI, and the green is the actual protein structures obtained from the experiment. So actually they match pretty well with each other. And I think the DeepMind AlphaFold kind of solves pretty much solves the hard, very challenging protein folding problem based on the transformers. And of course, many other models in place, like to work together with the transformers. And the second very strong applications is the few shot or zero shot generalization. The few shot and zero shot means that you don't need that many labels for the models to do that task, right? So you can just show the model a few examples, and then the model already can do in that. So one thing that people observe for GPT, right? So the GPT is, it's kind of the same technology used in ChatGPT, is that people find it is very generalizable to the few shot problem. And it's even cooler is that you don't need to retrain the model for that. You just input, you just show the example to the model, and without any gradient updates, without doing any optimization, the model can do the task as well. For example, this is one example, right? So you just show the machine just a few examples of, say, 5 plus 8 equals 13, 7 plus 2 equals 9, right? And then later on, the machine learns that, okay, it's, I need to generate a sequence to kind of approximate the sum of the two digits, right? Just by showing the few examples, and then next time if you put, say, 9 plus 8, it will give you a 17 over there. Same, like if you show like a few examples of to correct the words, right? So some word is misspelled, and you show examples of how I want to like reorganize the words, and then it will also kind of capture that, oh, the task is to correct the word, or some other like a translation type of task. So it's pretty powerful, right? So if you train a really large, really large model, it do very well, pretty well in a few short settings. Another cool application is to generate images from languages. For example, this example is to show that it just generate an image of armchair in the shape of avocado. And then it will generate, various pictures like showing exactly what you described. I think it may help, and I don't know, in the design space, right? So just to get some random ideas of, how you want that chair to be like. So yeah, I think it's a pretty interesting applications. So this is where we are at the edge. And the future, I think, is going to enable more applications in terms of the video understanding, finance, and also many generative modeling. Generative modeling is the ChatGPT, right? So it's kind of generates additional language, like additional kind of response to your input. And of course, there's some missing ingredients. The missing ingredients is, although I'm quite not fully got this, is external memory, like the neural Turing machines. And the second is to reduce the computation complexity. And yeah, because the self-attention is a quadratic complexity, so people have been looking for ways to reduce both the computational complexity and also the memory consumptions of the larger models. And the third is to trying to align the language models more to mimic the human brain, because I think we have logics, we have the prior knowledge, right? So how can we factor those in to the NLP models is also a challenge. So this is basically a kind of overview of where we are right now and where is this like going to be. And yes, I will pause here a little bit to see if anyone have any general comment or question about this?
Yeah, I just had one quick question. You had mentioned when you were showing the in-context learning, you know, it's 5 + 8 is 13 and so forth. And then you said then it will know that 9 + 8 is 17, but that's already in there. But were you saying that essentially if you feed in a few examples of any mathematical formula, that it will be able to, no matter how complex, that it will be able to work with that? Is that, or is it just simple addition or what?
Yeah, the complexity, I don't think that has been taken into consideration. So the end goal, yes. The end goal is like whatever, like a few examples of pattern you show to the machine, then it will generalize to the future cases. But I don't think right now it can handle that complicated pattern, because if it's more complicated, then it may require more samples from you in order to generalize. Because if it's a simpler pattern, then maybe a few samples is already, you know, can tell enough for that.
And do we know why that is?
I just want to add, so like David, you're right. Something like addition, it's probably already seen, okay? But you can just say, I'm going to give it a pattern. Here's two numbers, and you don't even tell it what the rule is. Like, let's say secretly you're saying it's 2 times the first number plus the second number minus 2. Okay. And so it's not going to know that if you say first number star second number, but if you just show it 3-4 examples, oftentimes it can, you know, sort of match that pattern. I've seen stuff where it's like you give it a first name and a last name, and you grab the third letter from the first name and the last letter from the last name, and you concatenate, and you say the answer is this 2-letter string, right? And so these are things that if it's never seen before, it can do it by just you giving it a few examples. As Jan said, the complexity of it can't be that great, but that's just showing that like this is a problem that it's never seen before in all its training. It truly must be learning just from the examples you showed it.
Do you know if it can also, if you do that, can it also then output the actual formula of the mathematical operation that's being performed?
No. That would probably require very special training. But in context learning means that it can see certain things and it can then continue based on that, even if what you put in the context is not at all in its training. In fact, you know, you may have even seen sort of pathological examples where you say, I live on Earth, the sky is red, grass is blue, blah, blah, blah. And then it can continue exactly in that fashion, consistent with what you've, you know, told it as its starting assumptions.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question about Turing machines, which are neural Turing machines. Can you please explain what it is?
Yeah, that I'm not familiar as well. Yeah, I think that if you search it, I think there's a wiki page on that. Yeah, and right now I'm still not clear what is the major like advantage of using a neural Turing machines. I know that they have external memories for the network to operate, but I still need to see more examples of what's the main advantage of that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, then let's move on to just introduce the method itself. So first, I want to add a little bit more background in terms of why we need attention, right? So what's the motivation for that? I think the motivation starts from how can we model the long sequence more effectively? And usually, like I think the first attention is proposed mainly for the encoder-decoder problem, right? So you can think of the encoder-decoder as a machine translation, right? So in the encoder, you try to encode the source language, say English, right? And the decoder is trying to kind of decode the input, which is English language, into another language, say Spanish, right? So you want to transform one sequence into another sequence. So that's basically the encoder-decoder structure. And originally in the encoder-decoder, how the information is passed is through one fixed context vector. So basically from the recurrent neural network. So this is basically a recurrent neural network. And then the output from that is basically one fixed vector that kind of encodes all the information of your input sequence. And then that vector is passed on to the decoder. And then the decoder will use that one fixed piece of vector to decode the message into a different sequence. Then people realize the limitation of that because you know, if the sequence gets really long, right, it's sometimes not, you know, the message from early on may get lost in a long sequence, and one fixed vector may be not that efficient to kind of represent all the information in that sequence. And then people propose attention. So that's kind of how attention got into people's attention. So instead of just passing on one fixed context vector, it basically at each decoding timestamp, it will also look at all the hidden states in the encoder, right? So at each, say we are going to decode this word to be predicted, and at this word it will refer to all the previous hidden states, not just this one fixed vector, but all the previous hidden states. And then it will compute the attention scores. Attention scores basically tells you, okay, which word in the source sequence is more relevant for current decoding timestamp. So if the attention score is high, means it's very relevant, right? I should use the information you know, more for that source word in order to decode at this timestamp. And then the output of this will be a weighted sum of all the encoder hidden states. So you get another kind of like a contextual vector in addition to the outputs itself. So you basically concatenate the context vector with the output of the decoder, and together these two vectors are used to make a prediction for the following stages. So yeah, so the main differences in the regionally is one fixed vector to represent all the source sequence. While here with attention, you kind of get a different representation at each decoding timestamp. So that means that it's more powerful. It's going to be a much more powerful model than the previous one without attention. And also it makes it possible to model even longer sequence. With attention model, since it's going to attend to earlier, say earlier words in the source sequence. Okay, so that's kind of the motivation. And when I think about attention, I usually just think about what are the keys, what are the values, and who are the queries, right? So if you just trying to figure out the key, value, and queries, I think you pretty much get the attention. So how the attention operation is made? Say you have your input vector, so it's some embeddings of a word, right? And then you kind of first you need to get a keys. Keys is you can use like a transformation matrix, basically a linear matrix, and then you multiply with the embedding, and then you kind of transform it into another length of vector, right? So this is you kind of like from the length of 4, and you multiply it with some matrix, you get it to a length of 3 vectors in this case. And the same, you can use another transformation matrix to get you a value vector. And then for any query, so the query is used to do an inner product with the key vectors, right? So so this is your query. The query is basically you want to see which of the word is more similar or more relevant to the query. right? So basically you do a kind of like an inner product of these two. It's kind of like something like a cosine similarity, I think, if you think that way. And if you directly do like a inner product, so if it's very similar, then you're more likely to get a higher score for that. And then once you calculate your like a similarity scores, and then you do a softmax to make it kind of like a probability distribution. And then you, once you get the weights, then you kind of do a weighted sum of the values, right? So if the query is more similar to this case, and then you get a higher similarity score for this value. And thus the resulting output will be more like to this value over there. So this is basically how the attention, the basic operations of attention, right? So the main component it relies on the keys, values, and who are the queries, like where are the queries from. And different models may have a different idea of where this query is. Yeah, question?
Yeah, so what is a query?
Yeah, I will show next.
Okay, all right, thanks.
So in terms of the attention, there are many different types of attention, such as the soft attention, where you get the attention scores are kind of a floating value, right? So between 0 and 1. So it's like a kind of a gradual attention, right? So the attention scores is like from 0 to 1, for example. The hard attention, well, the attention score is 0 or 1. It's a kind of a binary attention that directly gives you the region of interest. And another different types of attention is the global attention versus local attention. So in the global attention, so the blue part is the encoder, red part is the decoder. And at this decoding timestamp, in the global attention model, it's going to kind of refer back to all the encoder hidden states in the past. So this is a global, right? So it's like a global attention to all the previous encoder hidden states. Well, in the local attention model, it will, so you will attend to local window, because I think for language, usually it's like a window of interest, right? So you just maybe just require a window of a smaller window of interest. First, you need to identify ways to allocate to find that window by doing some alignment, and then you only attend to the hidden states in that window. Yeah. So local attention is kind of, although it requires some additional kind of alignment, to identify the window, but I think it may save some computational cost if your sequence is really long. But I think, there are many different ways of how you actually can improve the computational complexity of the attention model. Well, local attention, it could be one way to resolve that. Yeah, so that's on the basic operation of attention, different type of attention. And the next we will work into the transformer. So the transformer to me is just a self-attention plus encoder decoder attention. And you may have many different you can stack like many different layers out of that. And what is a self-attention? So that is also a question to what is the query? So the query for the self-attention just comes from itself. So I will show an example. So if you click on step by step into transformer, so it will go into another transformer model, but I think I will just directly go to self-attention over here. So the self-attention is, say, the queries, right? So previously we have seen, okay, we can use the linear matrix to transform the input into keys all values. And in the self-attention, we also have additional queries, which is the query matrix, to transform the input into a query vector. So for each of the input variable or if input word, you got a query vector, key vector, and a value vector. And then you compute the scores, right? So the scores is basically the inner product between the query and the key, right? And then so this is doing some normalization of the dimension. And then you take a softmax to make it as a distribution. And then, so this is your weights. And then you kind of do a weighted sum of the values over there. And that's your final output for this thinking input. Yeah. So in the self-attention, basically the word in that sentence will attend to every word in its in that sentence, right? So it's kind of attending to itself, like so that what the output of that is basically a contextual representation of the word of that word, right? So it's not just like individual kind of embedding of the word, but the embedding of that word also relies on the words around it. So it kind of propose an efficient way to contextually embed the word based on the environment and context that the word is in. Yeah, so that's the idea of the self-attention. And another key is the encoder-decoder attention. I think it's very similar to any previous attention in the encoder-decoder model, which is, so again, the question is, who are the values, who are the keys, and who are the queries, right? So the values and keys are from the encoder output. So we have the encoder output, and we are going to apply the value matrix and key matrix to get us the value and keys. And then the query will come from the decoder output. So this self-attention layer in the decoder itself. So we are going to use the output from the self-attention in the decoder, and we will apply. So that is our query. So basically, we will use this information and to see which output from the encoder is most relevant for this decoding timestamp. Yeah. Another major component is a multi-headed attention, right? So the multi-headed attention is previously I just showed one transformation matrix for case values and queries. Well, instead of one, you can actually apply multiple matrix transformation. And the hope is that each transformation matrix will focus on one piece of information. In the end, we are just going to concatenate them together and doing another kind of multiply it with another linear transformation matrix. And in the end, is the representation for the multi-headed attention. The intuition for the multi-headed attention is this, right? For example, if you want to learn a representation for it over here, so one head may focus on the animal since it refers to the animal, and another head or another attention will focus on it was too tired. It's kind of the status of it. So that with the multi-headed attention, so that each attention can attend to one topic and one thing at a time. So that's the kind of the motivation behind the multi-headed. Yeah, so that's pretty much everything behind the transformers. And of course, in order to put all of them together over here, right? So there will be the self-attention layers, and then there will be some layer normalizations, and there will be some feed-forward network, and of course there will be some residual network, kind of skip the layers over there. Right, so you kind of stack multiple like attention blocks And same on the decoder side is you have the self-attention, and also you have the encoder-decoder attention over there. So basically, this is how the transformer is put up together, right? So the major components are the self-attention, encoder-decoder attention, and multi-headed attention. And also it includes all the previous tricks learned from other deep learning models, such as the skip and normalization over there. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for the transformer architecture. So any question?
Well, I hate to say it, but I still don't understand what a query is. So like key value is like a JSON object. So you've got a key and you've got a value. When you say query, first of all, why is the word query used? What's being queried and who's doing the querying, and what's an example query?
Yeah, so for example, over here, when I show you an example here, the query is basically like in the encoder-decoder structure, right? So at each time, for example, I want to do a translation, and this time I put a student there. So student is the query. Student is a query, and who are the values? All the input sequence, right? So we want to know that, okay, for the word student, what words like in the original input sequence is relevant in order for me to translate the to get the word student over here. The query is the kind of the target we want to.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. Okay, thanks. So it's a word, and it's kind of a target word in the corpus or the document.
So
yes,
if I could take a stab at this, what's kind of hard to show is that for every position in the sequence, and we're going to say words, okay, technically they're tokens and they could be like parts of words or whatever, but word is just a simpler thing to say. You're actually using each word as a query, and you're comparing it to every other word as a key, okay? And then you're saying which one matches the best. So I don't know that query and key and value are necessarily the most intuitive terms when you're first learning. I think if you know how transformers work, then you can see why those words are really appropriate. But so like, imagine you have a 10-word sentence, okay? And if you like know Python and you know like dictionaries and keys and values, okay? So then I'll use this analogy. It may or may not make perfect sense, okay? But so you've got a dictionary and it's a 10-word sentence, and so you use each of those words as keys, okay? And they have certain values behind them if you match that key. So in Python, normally what you would do is you would say, I want my dictionary, and then square brackets, and then the query is which entry that I want, which key I want. In Python, it has to be an exact match. If you don't do an exact match on an existing key, you just get a I didn't find that key error, okay? What's different here is that we're doing a softer matching, and we're saying which of the keys is closest to my query. And in this case, we're not doing all or nothing. We're not just taking 100% the one that's closest, but we're using the softmax function to say, we're going to weight all of the different entries in my dictionary, which, you know, if you have a long sentence, it could be, right, like 200 words or something like that. We're going to take all of them and we're going to weight them, and all the weights will add up to 1. And then I'm going to do a weighted average of, you know, the values from all of them. So it's not just all or nothing. But typically the examples you see, like the one that Yan showed where it's like it, what is it referring to? Like you're going to see like one word that tends to kind of pop, and all the, you know, a lot of the weight, if, you know, 80-90% of the weight is coming from that one word. I don't know if that helped. If you understood it before without the whole Python analogy, that's great. Ignore what I said, but if that helped, hopefully.
And yeah, no, that is helpful. One follow-up, and then I'll let others ask. But when you say it, whatever the word is, it sort of has more attention or is more important. How is that determined?
Yeah, so I think the reason why we have this part 2 is because I've asked a lot of those questions like you're asking. And I think if I show you examples with real numbers, it might help some people for it to just click and make more sense. But the idea is that imagine you're the computer, you're reading this, and you see the animal, didn't cross the street because it. And now it's already decided what it thought the word the meant. It's already decided what it thought the word animal meant. It's decided what, it thought the word didn't means, okay? And now it's looking at the word it, and I'm like, what do I think this word means? For a lot of words, if you have a word like, I don't know, computer, it's just going to have like stuff from the actual word embedding that it says, this is what this word is. In the case of it can decide, it's not really the meaning of the word it that I want. I want to know what other word in this sentence I should use to understand what it means in the context of this sentence. And so it can decide that it's going to actually completely replace the values it has for it with the values from the word animal, or it can decide it's going to blend 50-50, the embedding for animal with the word it, whatever. But that's the kind of thing where it basically can use the context to build a new set of numbers for what the meaning of that word is. And then, it's transformers are a little bit more complicated. There's other components than just the attention, but then also you have multiple layers of attention usually. So it can kind of build this meaning over multiple steps. But in this case, we're really saying, like in this classic example, we're saying that for the word it probably wants to steal numbers from other words in the sentence to say, what does this word it mean? And in this case, it's primarily going to copy numbers from the word animal.
I see.
Does that help?
Thank you. Yeah, very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Also,
Go ahead.
I think that figure that you had earlier shows 2 heads, and I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's like the green and the orangey brown or something like that, right?
So
yeah.
I think what they're trying to say is that, one of the heads, like, is the orange or whatever, and then the other is green. And the darker it is, the more attention it is paying to that word.
Yes.
So the orange head is paying more for the word it. The orange head is paying more attention to animal and the T for some reason. And then you can see that for the green head, it's paying attention to tire the most, and a little bit for street and was. So I think that's what this is depicting, and I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So I mean, we have to be careful to to be too confident in our interpretation, but you could say the orangey brown is deciding what is the it, like a what question, right? And then the green head is kind of saying more like describe the it. And so you're saying, oh, well, the what is an animal and the description is tired.
Yep.
Yeah, and so these are all hand-picked examples. So this is a nice example in which things have worked out.
Yes. Yeah.
So
I
have a quick question I posted in the chat. So just to follow up with that same example, what happens when you have a word like busy instead of tired?
Mm-hmm.
In that last example, in terms of the intensity of the heads, the color on the heads, I think, based on the last discussion points. Just wondering about how the transformers would be able to make decisions when there's an ambiguity like that, as far as, is there reference involved with it? maybe you can explain it
Yeah,
to me
so
or
I think
simplify it.
that all leads to a question of how the transformer is trained. So people usually use the transformer is usually pre-trained using different language modeling techniques. So this is what's later on, like in applications of BERT or the GPT. So the BERT training, so it using the mask language. For example, here, my dog is hairy over here, right? So it in the pre-training space, it just going to mask the hairy, and then ask the language model, say asking the model or the transformer encoders to predict that word. So the model will see lots of examples like this. So it's not just too tired or busy. Actually, usually the pre-training data set is huge, right? Say basically the whole Wikipedia database. And you're going to see lots of examples of that, right? Of this mask, like what is the possibility of this mask over there?
Yeah, so if I can, oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, if I can add, we try to show some examples in the papers and people's blog posts where we think we know what the attention is doing, but I mean, the rules are very complex, okay? And so the reality is if I gave you enough time and I said you can just hand code the weights to be whatever you want, you wouldn't do as well as when we use gradient descent, we train it, okay? Yeah. So I can't say for sure, like, hey, what is it doing or whatever. But in that actual example, if I remember right from the paper, they showed 2 sentences. The animal didn't cross the road because it was too tired, and the animal didn't cross the road because it was too hot. And in the too tired example, it attended to animal. And in the hot, it changed. The weights were smart enough that the attention actually attended it to road. Okay, now how it built those weights and knew to do that, I cannot explain to you, but that's just an example of showing that it seems to have worked, because when it said it was too tired, it pointed to animal. And when they changed just that one last word to it was too hot, it changed all the weight of the attention from animal to road.
Right, so these changes in attention in the cases of the hot, are they sort of Bayesian in nature? Are there some sort of probabilistic algorithms that it's being trained on to help it determine that hot is referring to the street a little bit more weighted than, let's say, the animal? Because essentially if the animal was too hot, it could have made that type of connection, but it eventually decided that the weights were still heavier on the street side. And is that, again, probabilistic or Bayesian algorithms at work?
There's no Bayesian logic embedded into the architecture or in the training mechanism. Basically, what happens is, let's imagine you have another sentence after the animal didn't cross the road because it was too hot, okay? Then in that next sentence, you're still talking about the animal in the road or whatever. If it got it wrong, then it's probably going to say the wrong thing in the next sentence. Okay, right? And so that's where it gets the negative feedback, and then the back prop, the gradient descent, will sort of shift the weights. Okay, in that one sentence alone, there's nothing really for it to mess up, right? But you can imagine if the sentence was, the animal didn't cross the road because it was too hot, comma, and it's blah blah blah, like you know, now it needs to know what that it is in order to sort of do the rest of the sentence, you know. So over time there will be enough examples where if it keeps getting it wrong, it's gonna screw up the words that come later. And so that's just the, you know, the way it's trained.
Yeah,
I hope that answers your question.
If I may add to that, one way to look at it might be that you have a network, you have weights, you have transformations, and you have some methodology that you have set up for training the data. You just put everything into it, and then what they show as examples, I feel, is like kind of a little bit like hindsight. You know, model worked, and you go model happen to process this particular sentence, and look, this thing makes sense to us, and so I feel that that's maybe some of the thing that's going on as well. I don't think it is specifically training on single examples, as people might think.
Yeah. So when we're actually using it, there's usually no matter what models you use. So there's usually a pre-training step and a fine-tuning step. So pre-training step is, you train a model on massive unlabeled data. So this data, you don't have to label them. So basically just use all the data you have, right? So for example, in the language modeling, you just use all the, let the machine read through lots of articles, and just learn the linguistics statistics by itself and adjust the weights on that. So it's a very good language model by itself, even without any labels in the beginning. And then later on, you kind of fine tune the model to do specific tasks later on, such as classification task or sentiment analysis or question answering, etc. So in the beginning, the pre-training is very important, and usually it requires lots of data to pre-train. But in reality, since we don't have, that large machines to pre-train, so that's why I think people usually open source the pre-trained model directly. So we don't have to redo that ourselves.